My name is Margaret, but everyone calls me Grandma Maggie. I am 75 years old now, sitting in my rocking chair by the window, watching the sun stretch its arms over the neighborhood. Time has carried me far, but there are some memories that glow brighter than others, and one of them is my 50th birthday. I remember it like it happened yesterday, not 25 years ago. That day was filled with joy, laughter, music, and surprises, some so big they could make your heart stop. You see, my 50th birthday was so much fun that I got gifts worth over $180,000. And to top it off, two of my exes almost fought right in front of everyone. I still remember the room falling into silence when those two men locked eyes with each other. People held their breath, forks hanging in midair, glasses freezing halfway to lips. The band stopped playing for a moment, and children pressed closer to their parents. One of them clenched his fist like he was ready to throw it, while the other stepped forward with that bold smile men wear when they want to prove they still matter. And just when everyone thought the first punch would fly, something happened that none of us expected. But before I tell you exactly what that was, let me take you back. Because a story is never just about the fireworks. It's about the little sparks that lead up to them. It's about the roads you walk, the kindness you give, and the storms you survive before the big moment arrives. So settle in, my dears. Tell me, where are you watching from? California, maybe? Or Texas? Or perhaps you're somewhere cold like Minnesota, wrapped up in a blanket, listening to my old voice telling you secrets from the past. Wherever you are, I want you to feel as if you are right there with me in that party hall watching everything unfold. Now let me introduce the people who made that day unforgettable. First, there was my oldest daughter, Linda, a woman with a strong will and a soft heart. She was the kind of person who would fight for her family even when it meant sacrificing her own dreams. She planned that birthday like it was a royal wedding, making sure every chair had a ribbon, every plate had a sparkle, and every guest felt welcome. Then there was Michael, my son, who had a gift for business. He had just opened his first auto shop back then, and though money was tight, he promised me that one day he would give me a gift so big it would make the whole town talk. And my youngest, sweet Caroline, who was only 20 then, shy as a mouse but with eyes that carried storms. She was my little secret keeper. But of course, what's a story without the men who once thought they could win my heart forever? James, my first ex, tall and charming, with silver streaks already showing in his hair at 55. He had the kind of voice that could talk a snake out of its skin, and even though we had gone our separate ways, he never lost the habit of winking at me whenever we met. And then there was Robert, my second ex, strong and serious, with broad shoulders and a temper he tried to keep hidden. Robert didn't believe in jokes. He believed in action. Where James would sing a sweet tune, Robert would build a house with his bare hands. Both of them showed up to my birthday, uninvited, carrying gifts too heavy to ignore, and memories too raw to bury. Now, don't think my life was all roses before that day. Oh no, children. Life had taught me hard lessons. I had seen betrayal, I had tasted hunger, and I had worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table when my kids were small. I had learned that kindness was not weakness, and forgiveness did not mean foolishness. I always told my children, help people even when they don't deserve it, because kindness is like planting seeds. You never know when they will grow and feed you. Maybe that's why, on that 50th birthday, so many people came. Not just family but neighbors, old friends, and even strangers whose lives I had touched one way or another. The day started quietly, the way special days often do. I woke up to the smell of pancakes and bacon, my favorite breakfast, cooked by Caroline. The house was alive with balloons and flowers. Linda was barking orders at the decorator like a general leading an army, and Michael was running in and out, checking on deliveries. "Mama," he said, "today you're going to see how much you mean to people. Don't you dare cry, because I know you're going to cry." And he was right, I did cry, but not for the reasons he thought. By noon, the hall was shining like a diamond. Lights hung from the ceiling like tiny stars, and the tables were covered with golden cloth. A band was setting up their instruments, testing their guitars and drums. I walked in, dressed in a simple navy blue gown Linda had bought me, and people started clapping. I wasn't expecting so many faces, but they kept coming. Friends I hadn't seen in decades, cousins who drove across states, church members who sang happy birthday at the top of their lungs. And then the gifts began to pour in. At first it was little things, perfumes, handbags, jewelry. But then something unusual happened. Michael stood up, cleared his throat and said, "Mama, you always gave us more than you had. Today I want to give you something back." He handed me an envelope, and when I opened it, there was a check for $25,000. The room gasped. I covered my mouth, tears rolling down my cheeks. "Where did you get this?" I whispered. He just smiled and said, "From working hard, just like you taught me." That was just the beginning. Linda gave me stocks worth $30,000. Caroline surprised me with a beautiful necklace that once belonged to my mother. Friends pitched in money, jewelry, even shares of land. By the time all the envelopes and packages were opened, the total value was more than $180,000. I sat there in disbelief, my heart pounding, my fingers trembling as I touched the pile of blessings on the table. I thought to myself, this is what kindness brings back. This is the harvest of every seed I planted. But while everyone cheered and clapped, something else was brewing in the room. Two men, standing on opposite ends of the hall, were staring at each other like bulls ready to charge. James raised his glass in my direction, that smile on his lips, and shouted, "To the most beautiful woman I ever loved." The crowd laughed and clapped. But Robert didn't clap. He stood still, his jaw tight. His eyes locked on James like he wanted to burn holes through him. Then he stepped forward, his voice louder than the music. "You loved her. You left her, James. Don't stand there and pretend." The room went silent. People exchanged nervous glances. My children froze. My heart thumped in my chest. James put his glass down slowly, his smile fading. "Careful, Robert," he said in a low voice. "This isn't your stage." Robert clenched his fist, and for a second, I thought the years had melted away and we were back in the days when they both fought for my hand. The tension grew so thick you could cut it with a knife. Then Robert took one step closer. James didn't back away. And just when I thought the first punch would land, just when Robert's hand curled into a fist and James's lips tightened into a thin line, the sound of a champagne glass shattering on the floor stopped everyone in their tracks. A little boy, no more than 7 years old, had dropped his cup of soda while trying to peek at the scene. The glass didn't just break. It screamed across the marble floor, the shards scattering like sparks from a fire. People gasped, some women jumped back, and the band leader coughed nervously as if the music could hide the tension. I looked at my two exes and whispered under my breath, "Not today, Lord. Not on my birthday." My children were frozen. Linda's hand was halfway in the air, as though she was about to clap to distract everyone. Michael was whispering something into Caroline's ear, his eyes darting between the two men like a referee before a boxing match. And then, out of nowhere, little Caroline, shy Caroline who rarely spoke in crowds, walked right up to the microphone stand. She cleared her throat, her cheeks burning red, and said, Excuse me, everyone. Can we please sing another song for my mama?" Her voice trembled like a violin string. But it worked. The tension cracked, people shifted in their chairs, and the band struck a few playful notes. The two men didn't move, though. They stood there, staring, their pride heavier than the gifts on my table. I stood up. My knees shook, but I knew I had to do something before fists flew. "James." "Robert," I said firmly, my voice stronger than I expected. "If you two want to fight, you can do it outside, but not here, not in front of my children, not on the day they worked so hard to honor me." My words cut through the silence like a bell in the night. Some clapped, others nodded. But the men didn't move. They both looked at me, then at each other, and for a second I thought maybe they would both laugh it off. Instead, Robert reached into his jacket pocket. My heart nearly stopped. For a moment I feared the worst. My imagination ran wild. But when he pulled it out, it wasn't a weapon. It was a small velvet box. He flipped it open, and inside was a gold bracelet shining under the lights. "This," he said loudly, "was meant for Margaret 30 years ago. She never got it because I was too stubborn. But today she will. The crowd gasped. Whispers rippled across the room like wind across water. Robert walked toward me, his eyes softening, the bracelet glimmering in his hand. But before he reached me, James stepped forward too. From behind his back, he pulled out a long, thin package wrapped in silver paper. "And this," James said, his voice dripping with charm, "is for the woman who taught me what love really means, even if I was too foolish to keep it." He handed the gift to Michael, who looked as if he had swallowed a whole lemon. Now the whole hall was buzzing. People were leaning forward in their seats, whispering to each other, trying to guess what would happen next. Would I take Robert's bracelet? Would I open James's gift? Would I send them both out? Even I didn't know in that moment. But let me pause here to remind you, life isn't always about the dramatic clashes. It's also about the quieter moments, the ones that shape who we are. Before the storm of that birthday, there had been many days of calm and sacrifice. Days when I worked late nights at the diner, serving coffee to strangers just to buy books for my children. Days when my hands bled from cleaning houses, but I still smiled at neighbors because kindness costs nothing. It was those small choices, those seeds of goodness, that brought people into that hall to shower me with love. I remembered one winter, when our neighbor Mrs. Jenkins had no money for heating oil. I slipped an envelope with $20 under her door, even though it meant I wouldn't have enough for my own groceries. Years later, at my party, her daughter came forward with a check for $5,000. She said, "This is for all the times you were the mother we didn't have." That's how life works, children. You give, and one day it comes back to you in ways you never imagined. But back to that hall. Robert was still standing with the bracelet. James was waiting with his gift. My children were restless, unsure whether to interfere or stay quiet. The guests leaned forward, their eyes wide. And I felt my throat tighten. For all my years, I had never been in a moment so tense, with two men from my past fighting to prove something in front of everyone I loved. I reached out my hand, ready to, and then the lights went out. The hall was swallowed in darkness. Women screamed. Children cried. Glasses clinked to the floor. The music stopped completely. All I could hear was the pounding of my heart and the shuffle of feet in the dark. Someone shouted, "What's happening?" Another voice cried, "Is it a blackout?" I gripped Caroline's arm tightly in the darkness. My mind raced. Had someone pulled the plug? Was this an accident or something planned? And then, from the far corner of the hall, came a loud crash. Something heavy had fallen or maybe been pushed. The crowd gasped again, and I froze in place, holding my breath. The hall was pitch black. I couldn't even see my own hand stretched in front of my face. All I could hear were voices rising in confusion, children crying, chairs scraping against the floor as people tried to stand. My heart thumped like a drum inside my chest. "Stay calm." Michael's voice rang out, steady and commanding, just like his father's had once been. "Nobody move too fast. We'll figure it out." But calm was the last thing people could manage. Someone bumped into me, nearly knocking me over. Caroline clutched my hand so tightly her nails dug into my palm. Linda's voice echoed in the dark. "Caroline. Mama. Where are you?" And then another crash. Louder this time. Something metal clanged against the ground. Guests gasped again. A woman screamed, "Lord, help us." Someone shouted, "Who's there?" And then, just as suddenly as it went dark, the emergency lights flickered on. A soft yellow glow filled the hall, not bright but enough for us to see. People blinked, shielding their eyes, then began looking around frantically. That's when we saw it. Near the far corner of the hall, a large decorative stand, the kind with flowers arranged at the top, had toppled over. The metal frame lay on the ground, petals scattered, water dripping onto the floor. But that wasn't what made everyone freeze. Standing right beside the fallen stand, caught like thieves under a spotlight, were James and Robert. Both of them had their hands on the frame, as if they had been wrestling over it. Gasps swept through the crowd like a wave. Guests leaned forward, whispering, "Are they fighting? What's wrong with them?" My children's faces turned pale. James let go of the frame first, raising his hands as though to say, "It wasn't me." Robert's chest heaved. His fists clenched at his sides. The two of them glared at each other, sparks flying in their eyes. "Really?" Linda's voice cracked like a whip. She stepped forward, her heels clicking angrily against the floor. "On my mother's birthday. After all she's done for you both. You should be ashamed." But shame wasn't in their eyes. Pride was. Pride and old wounds that never healed. I stepped forward slowly, my gown brushing the floor. The room grew quiet again. My voice, though soft, carried. "Gentlemen, I don't know what you think you're proving, but I'll tell you this. No gift, no fight, no show of strength can measure the value of a life well lived. I won't let you ruin this day." Some people clapped nervously. Others stayed silent, watching to see what would happen. And then, something unexpected happened. Robert's face softened. He bent down, picked up the fallen flowers, and gently set them back into the stand. His shoulders slumped, and for the first time that night, he looked less like a man with a temper and more like a man carrying regret. "You're right, Maggie," he said quietly. "This isn't about me." But James wasn't so quick to surrender. He stepped closer, his smile returning, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, Robert can play humble now, but don't be fooled," he said loudly so everyone could hear. "He had his chance, Maggie, and he threw it away. I won't stand here and let him act like some saint in front of all these people." The whispers grew louder. Guests were torn. Some looked at James with sympathy, others at Robert with suspicion. The tension in the room was back, thicker than ever. That's when Michael took a step forward, placing himself between the two men. His jaw was tight, his eyes fierce. "If either of you ruin my mama's day, you'll have me to deal with." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Some clapped in support of Michael. Caroline clung to my arm, whispering, "Mama, this is too much." And Linda looked like she was ready to physically drag both men out by their collars. But before anyone could move, before I could say another word, the front doors of the hall slammed open. Everyone turned. A tall figure stood in the doorway, backlit by the night, carrying a long box in his hands. His voice boomed through the hall. "I came here to give Margaret something none of you ever could." The guests gasped again. I clutched my chest. My children froze. Because the man standing there was not James. It was not Robert. It was my third ex-husband. The doors banged so hard that the echoes bounced off the hall walls. For a moment, everyone was too stunned to breathe. The figure in the doorway stepped forward, and the glow from the emergency lights revealed his face. My stomach dropped, and I heard Linda gasp beside me. It was Daniel. Yes, children, I had 3 ex-husbands in my life. I don't say it proudly, but I also don't hide from the truth. Life has a way of teaching us through broken roads. Daniel was my third and last husband, the one I thought would be my forever. He had charm, he had money, and he had a fire in his spirit that lit up every room. But that fire often burned too hot, and when it did, it left nothing but ashes behind. He walked out of my life 15 years before my 50th birthday, and I hadn't seen him since. And yet, here he was, standing in the doorway of my celebration like a ghost from the past, carrying a long box wrapped in black paper. He looked older, of course. His hair was thinner, his beard streaked with gray, but his eyes were exactly the same. Sharp, restless, and unreadable. The guests erupted into whispers. "Is that? Oh Lord, another one. How many men did she marry?" James stiffened, his lips curling into a scowl. Robert's jaw tightened. Both of them looked like soldiers ready to defend their territory. And there was Daniel, striding down the aisle between the tables with that confident swagger that once made me fall for him. He stopped at the edge of the stage, lifted the box, and placed it gently on the gift table. "This," he said, his voice carrying through the room, is something I wanted Margaret to have years ago. But fate had other plans. He looked directly at me, and for a second I felt like I was 30 again, caught in the snare of his gaze. Tonight I make it right. The room went silent. All eyes turned to me. My children's faces were full of questions. Caroline's eyes were wide with fear. Linda looked ready to throw Daniel out herself. Michael's fists were balled at his sides. I took a deep breath and forced myself to stand tall. My voice trembled, but I spoke. Daniel, you shouldn't have come. That broke the silence. People gasped. A few clapped nervously. Some leaned closer to their neighbors to whisper. James smirked, clearly enjoying my rejection. Robert crossed his arms, nodding slightly as if to say, good. But Daniel didn't flinch. He stepped closer, his voice softer now but firm. Maggie, I know I caused you pain. But I also know you still remember the good we had. This gift, it's not money, it's not jewels. It's something from my heart. Now let me pause here, children. I want you to understand something important. Life is full of people who will disappoint you. Some will betray your trust. Some will waste your years. But never let the bitterness of their mistakes poison your spirit. I learned to forgive not because they deserved it but because I deserved peace. I didn't carry grudges. I carried lessons. That's why, even as my knees shook and my chest tightened at the sight of Daniel, I didn't scream at him. I didn't curse. I didn't fall apart. I just stood there, steady as a mountain, waiting to see what he would do next. Linda stepped forward, her voice sharp. Mama doesn't need anything from you. You had your chance. Leave before you cause more trouble. The crowd clapped at that, some shouting yes. And that's right. But Daniel only smiled. He unwrapped the black paper carefully, his fingers deliberate, drawing out the suspense until people leaned forward in their seats. He opened the long box. Inside was a violin. Not just any violin, it was my father's violin. The very same one I thought had been lost years ago when our old house caught fire. I pressed my hand to my mouth, tears stinging my eyes. How did you? I whispered. Daniel's voice softened, almost tender. I salvaged it that night, but I was too proud, too angry to give it back. Kept it all these years. But it always belonged to you. Gasps filled the room. Some people wiped tears from their eyes. My children were frozen in shock. For the first time that night, James and Robert didn't look angry. They looked small. The violin gleamed under the lights, its wood-polished strings shining. Memories came rushing back. My father sitting on the porch, playing lullabies as the sun went down, me dancing barefoot in the yard as a little girl. That violin was more than an instrument. It was a piece of my soul. I reached out slowly, my fingers trembling, and touched it. For a moment the room disappeared. It was just me, my father's music echoing in my mind, and Daniel standing there, eyes full of something I couldn't read. But just as I lifted the violin out of the box, a loud bang shook the hall. The doors burst open again. This time it wasn't an ex-husband. It was two police officers, their badges glinting, their faces serious. One of them shouted, "Who here is Margaret Thompson?" The hall went dead silent. All eyes turned to me. The whole hall went silent, like someone had pressed pause on life itself. The only sound was the faint hum of the emergency lights and the soft creak of the violin in my trembling hands. "Who here is Margaret Thompson?" the officer repeated, his voice sharp, eyes scanning the room. Dozens of heads turned toward me at once. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "That's her. What could they want with Maggie? Oh Lord, don't tell me." My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might burst through my chest. My knees felt weak, but I stood tall, clutching the violin like it was a shield. "I am Margaret," I said, my voice steady, though my insides were quaking. The officer stepped forward, his boots heavy on the marble floor. He looked at me with a face so serious it froze the air around him. "Ma'am," he said, "we need to speak with you immediately. It's urgent." Gasps filled the hall. Caroline clutched my arm. Mama, what's happening? Linda's eyes were blazing with fear. Michael stood in front of me like a bodyguard. Even James, Robert, and Daniel. All of them went stiff, their rivalries forgotten for the moment, replaced by confusion. I forced myself to breathe. What's this about? I asked, my voice low but clear. The officer exchanged a look with his partner, then spoke. We can't discuss details here. But we need you to come with us now. It concerns a very large sum of money connected to your name. The room erupted in chaos. Guests gasped, some stood, some shouted questions. Linda cried out. What do you mean money? Michael demanded. What kind of game is this? Caroline clung to my side, whispering. Mama, don't go. I raised my hand, trying to calm everyone. Please, I said. Let them speak. The second officer, a younger man with a softer expression, stepped forward. Mrs. Thompson, there's been an issue with funds deposited under your identity. We're not saying you've done anything wrong, but your presence is required at the station tonight. Tonight, on my birthday. I felt the weight of the violin in my hands, the eyes of everyone on me, the fear of my children tightening around me. My heart whispered, after all I've lived, after all I've given, why now? But I didn't let panic show. I straightened my back and said, if I must go, then I'll go. But my family comes with me. Cheers erupted from the crowd. That's right. Stand strong, Maggie. But fear still clouded the air. The officers hesitated, then nodded. You can have family present, yes. Michael whispered fiercely. Mama, you're not leaving alone. Linda said. I'll get my purse. Caroline was in tears, clinging tighter. And my ex-husbands. They looked like lions pacing in a cage. James muttered under his breath. This is nonsense. Robert folded his arms, growling. Over my dead body. Daniel just stared at the violin in my hands. His eyes unreadable. Before we could move, the older officer raised his hand. Wait, there's more. The crowd hushed instantly. The officer continued, his voice lower now. We're not only here for Mrs. Thompson. We're also here because there may be someone in this room involved in fraud connected to her name. The whispers turned into a storm. Guests looked around nervously, some clutching their handbags, others glaring at neighbors. Suspicion spread like fire in dry grass. My stomach twisted. Someone at my party, was using my name in a crime? My 50th birthday, the night I thought was about celebration, was now crawling with shadows. Linda's face was red with anger. Who would dare use my mama's name like that? Michael was fuming. If I find out who, I'll drag them out myself. Caroline just sobbed into my arm. And then, as if the night hadn't already spilled over with drama, the younger officer's radio crackled. A voice came through, urgent. He pressed it to his ear, listened, and then his face went pale. He whispered something to his partner, and the older officer's jaw clenched. Then he looked back at me. Mrs. Thompson, he said gravely, we've just been informed, the suspect is already here in this hall. The crowd erupted into screams. People jumped up, pointing fingers, shouting names. The music equipment buzzed as the band scrambled away from their instruments. Chairs tipped over, glasses shattered. And in the middle of the chaos, the officer pointed his finger. Straight at one of my ex-husbands. The officer's finger cut through the air like a knife. The whole hall froze as his voice rang out. Robert Johnson, step forward. For a moment no one moved. Robert's face hardened like stone. His arms still folded across his chest. Guests gasped, some whispering his name in shock, others clutching their pearls like this was a courtroom drama instead of a birthday party. Caroline cried, "No, it can't be him." Linda put a protective arm around her. Michael's jaw dropped, then tightened into rage. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. James smirked, just a little, as if he'd been waiting for Robert to fall from grace. And Daniel leaned back against a chair, stroking his beard, watching with unreadable eyes. Robert finally spoke. his deep voice booming across the hall. "You've got the wrong man." He stepped forward, fists clenched at his sides, his glare locked on the officer. "I've done a lot of things in my life, but fraud. Using Margaret's name. Never. I'd sooner cut off my own hand." The officer didn't flinch. He held up a folder thick with papers. "We have evidence linking your bank accounts to funds deposited under Mrs. Thompson's identity. You'll have the chance to explain yourself at the station. But for now, we need you to come with us." Gasps swept across the room again. Guests began to mutter. Could it be true? But he seemed so decent. "I always thought Robert was the quiet one." I raised my hand, silencing the noise. My voice shook, but I spoke from the heart. "Robert," I said softly, "look me in the eyes and tell me the truth." His head turned toward me. His eyes, usually so fierce, softened. "Maggie," he said, "I swear to you I have nothing to do with this." My chest ached. I had known Robert for decades. I had seen his faults, yes, his stubbornness, his temper, but I had also seen his loyalty, his hard work. His hands building homes for people who couldn't pay him a dime. Could it be true? Could he really have used my name in something so ugly? Linda shouted at the officers. "You can't just accuse him in front of everyone. Where's your proof?" Michael stepped closer, as if ready to fight. "You're not dragging this man away without explaining." Caroline clung tighter to me, whispering, "Mama, what if it's true? What if he did it?" And then James. Oh, James, he saw his chance. He stepped forward, raising his glass again like a performer on stage. "Well, well, well," he said loudly, his voice dripping with mockery. "Isn't it just like Robert to ruin a good thing? He couldn't keep Maggie happy back then, and now he's trying to drag her name through the mud. Pathetic." The crowd gasped again. Robert's face turned crimson. He lunged toward James, fists flying, but Michael and two guests grabbed him before the first punch landed. Chairs toppled. Glass shattered. The hall shook with shouts. I stepped forward, my voice thundering. "Enough!" The violin in my hand trembled, but my spirit did not. This is my birthday, and I will not have it turned into a battlefield. If Robert must go with the police, he will go. But I will be there too, to hear the truth with my own ears. Some clapped, others murmured, but the chaos settled. Robert stood still, chest heaving, sweat glistening on his forehead. His eyes burned into mine. "Maggie," he whispered, "trust me." The officers nodded and moved closer to escort him. Michael growled but stepped aside, knowing a fight wouldn't help. Linda shook her head in disbelief. Caroline sobbed harder. James smirked. Daniel kept watching, his eyes narrowing, like a man piecing together a puzzle no one else could see. As they began leading Robert toward the doors, the younger officer's radio crackled again. A frantic voice came through. "Stop. Don't move him yet. The wire transfer just flagged another name tied to the same account. Repeat. Another suspect is in the hall." The room erupted again. Guests screamed, some ran for the doors, others pressed closer in morbid curiosity. My head spun. Another suspect. Here. The officer froze, his grip on Robert's arm tightening. He looked around the hall slowly, then said, "The second name is Daniel Carter." The hall shook with gasps louder than ever. My third ex-husband. Standing right there, staring at me, with my father's violin still gleaming in my hands. The moment Daniel's name fell from the officer's lips, the entire hall turned into a storm. Guests gasped louder than I'd ever heard, and someone even dropped a glass that shattered against the marble floor. All eyes spun toward Daniel, who stood still, as calm as the eye of a hurricane. His lips curled into the faintest smile. "Well," he said, smooth as silk, "this evening just got interesting." Michael was the first to explode. "Daniel," he shouted, "you slimy snake. I told Mama years ago you couldn't be trusted." He charged forward, but Linda grabbed his arm and hissed, "Stop it, Michael. This isn't the time." Caroline covered her mouth, trembling, whispering, "Not Uncle Daniel too." James, meanwhile, was practically glowing. He spread his arms like a victorious actor. "See? You thought I was the villain, but look who's caught now." His laughter echoed across the hall, cruel and sharp. Robert, still being held by the officers, snapped his head toward Daniel. His voice thundered. "You set me up. You knew I'd be blamed. Didn't you, Daniel?" Daniel tilted his head, eyes twinkling with that infuriating calmness. "Set you up? Please, Robert. You give me too much credit. If your hands aren't clean, don't blame me for your dirt." The room boiled with tension. Guests whispered, some pulling out their phones, others backing away as if gunshots might follow. I gripped the violin tighter, my knuckles white. "Daniel," I said firmly, stepping closer. "Look me in the eye. Did you use my name? Did you touch a single cent that wasn't yours?" For the first time, his calm cracked. His eyes softened. Pain flickered there like a candle struggling in the wind. He took a slow breath, then spoke in a low voice only I could hear. "Maggie, not everything is what it seems. But I can promise you this. I never wanted to hurt you." The officers cut in sharply. "Mr. Daniel Carter, you're coming with us for questioning." He didn't resist. He simply held his hands out, almost like he had expected this moment all along. The older officer began reading him his rights, while the younger one reached for his wrists. But before the cuffs clicked, Daniel turned his head toward me and said loudly, for everyone to hear, "Ask them about the violin, Maggie. It's not just music, it's the key. Don't let it out of your sight." The hall went silent. The violin in my hands suddenly felt heavier, almost alive. My father's gift, the same violin that had survived wars, floods, and family feuds. What did he mean by the key? Gasps rolled through the crowd again. Some whispered, "What's in the violin?" Others leaned forward, eyes wide, hungry for answers. Michael stepped in furious. "Mama, don't listen to his games. He's always been a liar. The violin is just a violin." Linda shook her head slowly. "Not necessarily. Haven't you ever wondered why your father guarded it so carefully?" Caroline's tears slowed, replaced by curiosity. "Mama, could it be hiding something?" James clapped his hands dramatically. "Oh, this is rich. The violin is a treasure chest now. Maybe it's got diamonds stuffed inside. Maybe Maggie's been sitting on millions all these years and didn't even know." Robert roared, his voice breaking through the noise. "That's it, isn't it? The violin. That's what this whole mess is about." He struggled against the officer's hold, his eyes wild. "Daniel wants it, James wants it, maybe even these cops want it. But Maggie, it belongs to you. Don't let them take it." The officers barked orders, trying to restore control, but the guests were in full panic. Some surged closer to see the violin, others shoved back in fear of the chaos. The air grew heavy, buzzing with suspicion, greed, and fear. I held the violin tighter to my chest, my heart racing. My father's words echoed in my memory, words he'd spoken to me on his deathbed. "Maggie, never let go of the violin. Carries more than music. One day you'll understand." The officers finally managed to push Daniel toward the doors, but he twisted his head one last time, shouting over the crowd, "Maggie, play it. Tonight before it's too late. Play the violin." And then the doors slammed shut behind him. The hall descended into madness. Guests demanded answers, shouting at me, shouting at the officers, shouting at each other. Michael tried to push them back, Linda begged for calm, and Caroline clung to me with wide, frightened eyes. I lifted the violin slowly, my hands trembling. The crowd hushed, all eyes on me. And then, as my bow touched the strings, the lights in the entire hall flickered. Once, twice, before plunging us all into total terrifying darkness. The blackout swallowed the hall in a single breath. 1 second I was raising the violin to play. The next we were buried in pitch-black silence. Gasps rippled through the room, followed by shrieks as people stumbled in the dark. Glass crunched underfoot, chairs scraped, and someone shouted, Don't move. Stay where you are. Caroline screamed and clung tighter to my arm. Linda called out, Michael? Where are you? James's voice cut through the dark, mocking as ever. Perfect. Just perfect. A blackout during the biggest scandal of the year. But then, in the chaos, I felt it. Hands. Not Caroline's gentle grip. Not Linda's searching touch. A strong, rough hand grabbed at the violin in my arms. I jerked back. Stop! Cried. My voice echoed, sharp and desperate. Whoever it was pulled harder, yanking the violin against my chest. The bow slipped from my fingers, clattering to the floor. Caroline screamed again. Mama! Let go! I shouted, pulling with every ounce of strength left in my 75-year-old bones. The hall erupted into panic. Shouts, feet pounding, more glass breaking. Somewhere, Michael bellowed. Who's touching my mother? A scuffle followed, bodies crashing into tables. Then bright light. A phone's flashlight flicked on, then another and another, until the hall glowed in scattered beams of white. Guests shone their lights wildly around, faces pale, eyes wide. And there it was. James, his hand still locked around the violin's neck, glaring at me like a cornered animal. Gasps erupted again. Linda pointed, her voice shaking with fury. James, what are you doing? Michael lunged forward, grabbing James by the collar. You filthy thief. I knew you were after it. He yanked James so hard the man nearly toppled backward. James barked like a wild dog. You fool. It's mine as much as hers. That violin holds what your father never wanted you to know. The hall fell silent. My breath caught. What did you say? I whispered. James's eyes darted around, lips curling into a sneer. Oh, don't play innocent, Maggie. You think your daddy gave you that violin just for pretty songs? Well, he left it to you because it's a vault. And I know exactly what's inside. The crowd roared in disbelief. Some shouted, he's lying. Others gasped, a vault. Caroline buried her face against my shoulder, trembling. Linda's voice cut sharp like a knife. James, you always were a liar. Don't drag Papa's memory into your greed. But Michael didn't wait for more words. He shoved James hard against a table, sending bottles crashing to the floor. Guests screamed and backed away as the two men grappled, one hand on the violin, the other on each other's throats. Stop it! I cried, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break my ribs. This isn't what your father would want. But neither listened. They wrestled, knocking chairs aside, their shadows leaping against the flashlight beams like monsters on a wall. Then suddenly a crack. The sound of wood splintering cut through the hall. My scream tore from my throat before I even realized what had happened. The violin, my father's violin, had hit the edge of the table. A jagged crack split along its body. The crowd gasped. Time seemed to freeze. And then something fell out. A small envelope, yellowed with age, slid from the hollow of the violin and landed on the floor between Michael and James. Everyone froze. Linda's hand flew to her mouth. Caroline whispered, "What is that?" Robert, still held by the officers, shouted, "I told you." The violin was the key. James dove for the envelope, but Michael tackled him down, both men crashing onto the marble floor. Guests screamed again. The officers rushed forward, trying to separate them. I stumbled forward, my eyes locked on that envelope. My father's secret. The thing he had guarded all his life. The reason my birthday had turned into a battlefield. I bent down, my fingers trembling as they brushed the paper. But before I could open it, a gunshot shattered the air. The envelope flew from my hands. And the entire hall erupted into chaos once more. The gunshot cracked like thunder, echoing against the marble walls. People screamed, ducked under tables, and scrambled for the exits. Wine glasses shattered on the floor as the elegant birthday hall turned into a war zone. My ears rang. My heart pounded. My first thought wasn't the gun, it was the envelope. Where had it gone? The flashlight beams swung wildly through the chaos. And then I saw him. Michael, crouched low, clutching his shoulder, blood blooming through his white shirt. Caroline shrieked, "Michael!" and rushed toward him, but Linda caught her arm just in time. "Stay back." "Who fired that shot?" the older officer bellowed. His own gun drawn, scanning the crowd. All eyes darted around the room. And then, slowly, like a curtain rising, the crowd parted. There he was, James, standing tall, his face twisted with fury, holding a small black pistol in his hand. Gasps erupted again. Someone shouted, "He's lost his mind." Another cried, "Call more police." "Put it down, James," the officer barked, his gun aimed squarely at him. But James only laughed, a cold, broken sound. "You think I'm going to let my chance slip away? Well, that envelope belongs to me. It always has." His hand shook, but his eyes burned like fire. Robert yelled, "You're insane, James. Maggie's father never trusted you. That's why he left it with her." "Shut up," James roared, waving the pistol. "None of you understand. That violin wasn't just a keepsake. It was insurance. The old man owed me, and he knew it." My throat went dry. "Owed you?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. James's eyes snapped to mine, and for a flicker I saw something: hurt, anger, desperation. "Your father took something from me, Maggie. He promised me I'd get it back one day. But instead he gave it to you. You." His voice cracked, and for the first time I saw not just a villain, but a broken man clawing at ghosts from the past. The younger officer whispered to his partner, "He's unstable. We need to disarm him." But before they could move, James barked again, "Nobody touches me. Not until I have that envelope." My hands trembled, my eyes darting across the floor. Where was it? Where had it landed? And then, in the flicker of a flashlight beam, I saw it, just beneath a toppled chair, a few feet from Robert's shoes. Robert saw it too. Eyes met. His jaw tightened. He shifted slightly, trying not to draw attention. But James noticed. "Don't you dare!" he screamed, aiming the gun straight at Robert. "No!" cried, stepping forward. "James, stop. Don't throw your life away. Look at yourself. This isn't the man I knew." For a split second, his hand wavered. His eyes softened, almost like he remembered the younger version of himself, the man who had once made me laugh under starlit porches. But then the madness returned, and he snarled, "I'll do whatever it takes." The tension was unbearable. No one dared move. Caroline sobbed quietly, Linda's face was pale as chalk, and Michael groaned from his wound, clutching his shoulder while trying to crawl closer to me. Then, suddenly, another voice cut through the hall. "Drop it, James." Every head turned. Daniel. He was back. His wrists were still marked from the officer's cuffs, but he stood tall in the doorway. His voice calm, steady, commanding. His presence alone shifted the air in the room. James whipped his head toward him, furious. "Ooh, you think you can come back and steal it too? Not a chance." But Daniel didn't flinch. He stepped forward slowly, his hands open, his eyes locked on James. "You're not the only one your father made promises to, Maggie," he said firmly. "And I think it's time everyone knew the truth." The hall went silent, every breath held. "What truth?" I whispered. Daniel's eyes flicked from me to James, to the cracked violin on the floor. His voice dropped, low and steady. "Maggie, that envelope doesn't just hold money. It holds the secret of who really owns everything your father left behind. Land, accounts, even the cattle ranch. And it will tear this family apart." The crowd erupted with shocked whispers. Linda gasped. Caroline's knees buckled. Even the officers exchanged uneasy glances. And James. His face twisted into a mask of rage. He raised the pistol higher, veins popping in his neck. "Liar! It's mine." Daniel stepped closer. "Then pull the trigger, James. But know this. Once that envelope is opened, the truth will ruin you more than it will save you." The tension was a rope pulled so tight it was ready to snap. My breath caught in my throat, my fingers trembling. And then, another shot rang out. This time someone else had fired. The hall plunged into screams again. The envelope slid across the marble floor, blood spattering beside it. And I could not yet see who had fallen. The second gunshot echoed like a thunderclap, freezing every heart in the hall. Screams rose again, and people dove for cover. My chest tightened, my breath stuck in my throat. The envelope, now smeared with fresh blood, slid across the marble floor and stopped at the foot of the grand piano. I forced myself to look toward the shot's victim. My heart nearly stopped. James. He was on his knees, the pistol slipping from his grasp, his face pale as milk. Blood soaked through his jacket, dripping onto the floor. His eyes darted wildly, then locked onto me. "Maggie," he croaked, his voice raw. "Don't let them take it." He slumped sideways, groaning, his hand clutching his wound. Chaos exploded around us again. Caroline wailed. Linda shouted for help. Michael, still bleeding from his shoulder, tried to push himself upright, yelling at the officers. Guests scrambled in panic, some crying, others too stunned to move. And then I saw who had fired. Daniel. He stood near the door, the officer's gun in his hand, his face grim. His voice was steady as he said, "I didn't want it to come to this. But James left me no choice." The officers rushed toward him, shouting, "Drop the weapon!" He obeyed instantly, raising his hands and setting the gun on the floor. But his eyes never left mine. "Open it, Maggie," he said, his voice like steel. "Now!" My legs trembled as I crossed the hall. Linda clung to Caroline, whispering prayers. Michael growled at Daniel, "If my mama gets hurt because of you." But he was too weak to finish. I bent down, my fingers trembling as they touched the blood-stained envelope. Slowly I tore it open. The room went silent, every soul holding its breath. Inside was a folded letter. The paper was old, edges yellowed. My father's handwriting scrawled across it. My hands shook as I read aloud. "To my daughter Margaret, and to the men who have fought for what was never theirs. The violin has carried our family's legacy not in its music, but in its secret. Inside are documents that prove the ownership of all my land, my accounts, my cattle, and my estate. It belongs not to me, nor to any of you bickering men, but to the one who shows kindness and protects this family above all else. That is the heir of my fortune." Gasps filled the hall. My eyes blurred with tears. I pulled out the second paper. It was a will, signed and sealed. And on it, the heir was named, clear as day. Caroline. The room erupted in shock. Caroline herself collapsed into Linda's arms, sobbing. Michael staggered forward, face pale. Robert shouted, "Impossible!" Daniel lowered his head. His lips pressed tight. Even James, lying in his own blood, groaned in disbelief. "It can't be," he rasped. "The girl. She's just a child." But it was true. My father, wise in his own strange way, had skipped over the men, skipped over me, and left it all to the one person who had shown nothing but purity, love, and innocence. My daughter. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I clutched the will. "Papa. You wanted to protect her from all this madness." Caroline sobbed. "I don't want the money, Mama. I just want us safe." The officers finally moved in, cuffing James and pulling him away, while medics rushed to tend to his wound. Daniel stood silently, his eyes meeting mine with a look I couldn't quite read. Guilt, regret, maybe even relief. Robert hung his head, shoulders slumped in defeat. Michael leaned heavily against Linda, too weak to fight anymore. The crowd, shaken and exhausted, began to murmur, their voices soft now, no longer hungry for drama but heavy with sorrow. I held Caroline close, the violin pressed between us. "You are the future," I whispered to her. "And we will not let greed destroy you." The officers cleared the hall, leading away my broken ex-husbands, leaving behind shattered glass, overturned tables, and stains of blood. The music of the night had died, replaced by the echo of my father's wisdom. And as the doors closed, I looked once more at the cracked violin in my arms. It was broken, yes, but it had revealed the truth, and with it, perhaps, a chance to heal what was left of this family. I raised my chin, wiped my tears, and whispered to the quiet hall. This was supposed to be my 50th birthday party. Instead, it became a battlefield. But out of the ruins, my daughter carries the torch. And maybe, just maybe, that was the gift all along.